veteran transition. And this is, I mean, this is where it starts from the beginning. Veterans and their challenges is the transition. And this is what you teach is the transition story and saying you can make a difference and a change very quickly right when you become a veteran.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on again, Neil. The transition, and truth be told, a lot of us hate that term because it almost signifies that there's some sort of end, and there isn't necessarily an end because there's a lot of getting used to being a civilian, not being in the military. You may go through multiple job transitions and different life transitions after you get out of the military, but the whole process is just so big, and I think a lot of people today still underestimate it and when it does start, they don't anticipate things like the emotions that are going to come into it, because you're going to fail at things. You may even get scared. um Imposter syndrome's a real thing, so there's all these different factors that come into it, and you have to learn to be able to give yourself grace and understand that you've never done this before, and you're going to make mistakes, but dust yourself off and hold on to that military grit and keep going.
Right, exactly. And I just not the resources, and that's what the SOS wants to do is help connect people to the right resources and really understand that it can be a very easier process if you plan it well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's so many resources. And it's the reason we started Vet SOS is, when you come out of the military, the government doesn't really tell you about any of the organizations that are out there. They're all nonprofits for the most part. And so trying to figure out, okay, where do I go? Where do I get the additional assistance I needed? A lot of people like to bash the transition program from the military. And I think maybe some of it's warranted, but at the same time, I don't think people give it the credit that it's due, because there is a lot of information and they give you such a short period of time to go through it. You really have to spend time on your own going back through the material and seeing what else is in there, and seeing what you missed when you were in the class, and understanding that that's a starting point. And it has to be cookie cutter because every one of us has a different transition and they can't cater to each of us. So it is kind of a global type look. So you have to understand that you're getting the basics. And then as you prepare to leave the military, there's so many organizations out here ready to help you. And that's why we came about, and that's trying to educate you about the different organizations that are out there. If you're looking for more resume help, or if you're looking for a specific type of job training, or you want to go back to school, or you want to start a business, all these things we can point you in the right direction with the resources that we've talked to. And that you'll find once you start your transition, you get out of the military, the veteran community wants to help you. So don't be scared to reach out to anybody because they will definitely help you and try to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, they'll definitely point you in the right direction, and it's the best opportunity for you, and in so many ways. And you learned from it just because of the podcast. So this is where the whole story comes: is you used the podcast as your transition map. Someone said you should do a podcast once you got out of the military, and you learned so much that it helped in your transition process to get you where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. My mentor pushed me to start the podcast actually while I was in my transition, and about 6 months into my transition. So it really benefited me because I was listening to the stories and the what not to do, and what pitfalls to avoid and what resources were out there. And so, being able to learn from the people who've done it before was what made my transition successful. And one of my favorite quotes is, don't ever ask directions from someone who's never been there. And it's one of those things. In the military, we're trained to go to our leaders and ask them if we don't know, and be pointed in the right direction. That's great while you're in the service. Unfortunately, leaving the service, most senior leaders don't have an answer for you because they've never done it. So it's important to reach out to the veteran community who's already done it, and we're here waiting to help you. Don't be scared to reach out to us. We are ready to help you, and use tools like Mill Mentor, where you can literally talk to people who volunteer their time to mentor, and you'll get all kinds of great advice, and it costs you nothing.
Right, and that's it. Bam, and you have the opportunity to where you need to go, and it's such an amazing experience to be ready for that. And I think the veterans, if we get the right transition, there's so many people that need them right now because they're so hardworking. They take directions so well, and yet people are turned off by somebody that came from to back to civilian life in so many ways.
Yeah, and I mean, employers have to understand that there's going to be a learning curve. Unless we're going from working in the field in the military to the same field in the civilian world, there's going to be a learning curve as we learn the language, learn the processes, things like that. But the one thing that 99% of the time you're going to find is veterans have the grit and the determination to get better and figure it out. And even when they struggle with things, they're going to try to figure it out. They're going to want to learn. They don't want to fail. That's not in our DNA. The US military has never gone into battle with the goal of failing. So, it's part of who we are. And just for employers, have a little patience and grace in that aspect too, that, we need some time to learn. But you point us in the right direction. We're going to get after it.
All right. VetSOSpodcast.com. Appreciate it, Sean. And we'll talk next week.
All right. Thanks, Neil.
You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show. And we'll